I never thought I would be the one to sink a War 42 million deal with nothing more than a perfectly timed resignation letter, but here we are. My name is Sofia Reyes, and for the last 25 years I've been the executive secretary to Victor Caldwell, the founder and CEO of Caldwell & Partners, one of the most aggressive private equity firms on the East Coast. People think being an executive secretary is just typing and coffee runs. They are adorably wrong. I am the final firewall between Victor and absolute chaos. I know which partner is sleeping with which associate, which board member is about to get indicted, which billionaire prefers his martini stirred exactly 7 times counterclockwise, and most importantly, I know where every single body is buried, figuratively, and, on one memorable occasion in 2011, almost literally. Victor hired me when I was 25, and he was still running the firm out of a WeWork in Midtown. I was the only person who could decipher his chicken scratch handwriting and translate his 3 a.m. manic genius into actual executable instructions. Over the years I built systems so airtight that even the FBI couldn't have penetrated them if they tried. My Outlook calendar was a thing of beauty, color, coded by priority, time zone, relationship risk, and likelihood of Victor throwing something if the meeting ran long. I had recurring reminders for things no one else even knew existed. Send flowers to Judge Henderson's wife peonies, never roses. Allergic. Remind Victor not to call the senator champ anymore. Check if the Cayman account needs topping up before the yacht fuel bill hits. I made $287,000 a year plus bonus, which sounds insane until you realize I once saved the firm $180 million by catching a single misplaced decimal in a term sheet at 2:47 a.m. on Christmas morning. Victor called me his corporate wife to my face and the most expensive insurance policy I've ever bought. Behind my back. Both were true. Then came Derek Harrington. Derek was 33, fresh from Harvard Business School, and had never actually worked in private equity before being hired as our new chief operating officer. Wore 4,000 Tom Ford sneaker with his suits and said things like synergy optimization and human capital reallocation without a trace of irony. His first week, he walked into my office. Well, technically the interim to Victor's office that I had ruled like a small kingdom for 2 decades, and said, "Sofia, right? We're going to be making some changes around here." I knew immediately I was going to hate him. He started with the coffee machine. The old one was a Mon 14,000 Swiss monstrosity that Victor had shipped from Zurich, because it was the only machine that made his espresso exactly the way he liked it. Derek replaced it with a Keurig. Victor nearly had a stroke. I fixed it by accidentally having the Swiss machine reinstalled while Derek was at a leadership retreat learning how to foster psychological safety. But Derek had bigger targets. Came to me on a Tuesday in March with a PowerPoint presentation, actually titled Administrative Efficiency Initiative. The slide that made my blood run cold was titled Executive Support Reorganization, and showed my position being replaced by something called MIMLY, Virtual Executive Assistants, Costi, E4090 month, and a junior admin named Kaylee who had just graduated from Clemson with a degree in communications, and, according to her LinkedIn, a passion for wellness and manifestation. Sofia. Derek said, spinning his MacBook toward me like he was revealing the cure for cancer, "You're clearly overqualified for many of these tasks. We're moving into the future. AI can handle scheduling, email management, travel coordination. Kaylee here will handle anything that requires a human touch. This represents a cost savings of approximately $264 annually." I stared at him for a long moment. I said slowly, "Do you know why Victor has never missed a single regulatory filing deadline in 25 years? Because you're very organized," he said with that smug little smile that made me want to introduce his face to my stapler. "No, because in 2009 the SEC changed the filing deadline from 5 p.m. to 14:30 p.m. without telling anyone. I found out because I was sleeping with the deputy director's scheduler. I have been reminding Victor about that deadline change every single year since. Emily the AI is not going to sleep with anyone at the SEC. Derek. He actually laughed. That's exactly the kind of antiquated thinking we're moving away from. Relationships are important, but systems are scalable. I tried to warn him. God, I tried. I showed him the calendar for the next month. 70. 2 separate meetings across 11 time zones, including 3 that literally could not happen without Victor being in 2 places at once, which I made possible through carefully coordinated private jets, and 1 memorable use of a body double. I showed him the encrypted filing system for the Apollo deal. Way 3.8 billion acquisition that was so sensitive we were using codenames based on My Little Pony characters because Victor thought it was funny. I showed him the reminder system that included, call Senator Warren's office and remind them about the campaign contribution before she introduces that new PE regulation. Derek's response was to schedule a meeting with Victor titled, Modernizing Executive Support Structure. ROI Analysis. Victor, bless his black heart, actually laughed when Derek presented it. You're firing Sofia? He asked, genuinely amused, the woman who once got me out of a North Korean prison with nothing but a satellite phone and a bottle of Johnny Walker Blue. It wouldn't be firing, exactly, Derek said quickly. More of a transition to a strategic advisory role. At reduced compensation, of course. Victor looked at me. I looked back at him with what I hoped was professional neutrality, and what was actually pure homicide in my eyes. The thing is, Victor was 71 years old and had been talking about retiring to his vineyard in Napa for 3 years. Derek had been brought in specifically to professionalize the firm for Victor's eventual exit, which meant Derek actually had more power than I realized. 2 weeks later, Derek presented me with a new contract. Strategic advisor, part-time, $90,000 a year, no benefits, and I would be training Kaylee and helping implement the AI system. I smiled sweetly, signed nothing, and started planning. The Apollo deal was closing in 6 weeks. It was the biggest deal in the firm's history, or $3.8 billion purchase price, another $600 million in potential earn-out, and it would cement Caldwell and Partners as the dominant player in the infrastructure space. The closing schedule was a masterpiece of corporate choreography that I had been managing for 14 months. There were 187 separate deliverables, 43 different law firms involved, and 1 regulatory approval that had to be filed at exactly 9:01 a.m. London time on a specific Tuesday because that's when the one examiner, who wasn't completely incompetent, started her shift. I knew every single moving part of that deal like I knew my own heartbeat. Derek was about to hand it all to a 22-year-old who thought due diligence was a yoga term. I gave my notice on a Friday afternoon. Professional, gracious, 2 weeks, notice like a lady. Derek looked like he'd won the lottery. Kaylee started on Monday. I spent those 2 weeks training her exactly as requested. I showed her the calendar system. I introduced her to Emily the AI. I gave her the master password list cell with one very important omission. I introduced her to all the assistants she'd need to coordinate with, being sure to mention that Victor preferred communication in writing because he sometimes forgets verbal instructions. A lie. Victor has an eidetic memory and I was setting the stage. On my last day, I left a single post-it note on Kaylee's monitor. It said, "Good luck, you're going to need it." And I walked out of Caldwell and Partners for the last time with 25 years of muscle memory telling me to go back and fix whatever catastrophe was about to unfold, and the delicious knowledge that for once I wouldn't. The first sign of trouble came on day 3. Kaylee called me. I was sitting on my balcony in my apartment, drinking wine at 11 a.m. on a Wednesday for the first time in 25 years, and my old work phone rang. I had kept it active specifically for this moment. Sofia, Kaylee said, and I could hear the panic already creeping into her voice like water rising in a sinking ship. I can't find the Apollo deal master file. Emily says it doesn't exist in the system. I took a slow sip of my Sanser. Did you check the encrypted server? What encrypted server? The one I mentioned on day 2 of your training. The standalone system that houses all active M&A deals over $1 billion, because Victor doesn't trust cloud storage after the Sony hack. There was a long silence. I don't think I wrote that down. I said, and it was the most satisfying sound I've ever made. Well, the password rotates every 72 hours based on an algorithm tied to the Nasdaq closing price. You'll need to call IT and have them generate a new admin credential, but make sure you get Miguel specifically because he's the only one who knows the system exists. He's in the Guadalajara office. 5-hour time difference. He usually takes lunch from noon to 3 their time. Okay, she said, and I could hear her typing frantically. Can you just tell me his extension? I don't work there anymore, Kaylee. I hung up. She figured it out eventually. Miguel helped her. But she lost 4 hours, and in private equity, 4 hours can mean the difference between a signed term sheet and a collapsed deal. Day 7 was when things started getting truly entertaining. The Apollo deal had a critical milestone. The EU antitrust filing had to be submitted by 5 p.m. Brussels time on that Friday. This wasn't a suggestion. The regulators had given us a 60-day window from the initial notification, and day 60 was that Friday. Miss it, and the entire deal timeline would reset, which would trigger a material adverse change clause that would let the seller walk away with our $150 million breakup fee. I had set up 17 different calendar reminders for this deadline, starting 90 days before it was due. I had coordination calls scheduled with 3 different EU law firms. I had backup couriers standing by in 2 cities. I had a encrypted thumb drive with all the filing documents that I personally kept in my desk drawer and was planning to hand carry to the courier on the morning of the deadline. That thumb drive was not mentioned in any training document. Kaylee discovered the EU deadline at 3:47 p.m. Brussels time on the Friday it was due. I know the exact time because Derek called me, and this time it wasn't Kaylee's carefully modulated panic. It was full-scale, voice-cracking terror. Sofia, we have a problem. I'm sorry, who is this? I said sweetly. I was at a yoga class. I had never been to a yoga class in my life. It was glorious. It's Derek Harrington. From Caldwell & Partners. We need your help. The EU filing for Apollo was supposed to go in today, and no one can find the documents. Did you check with the Brussels Council? They say they were waiting for us to send the final documents. Kaylee says she doesn't have them. Emily the AI doesn't have a record of any EU filing in the system. I held the phone away from my face and did a downward dog. My instructor gave me a thumbs up. Sounds stressful, I said. Sofia, if we miss this deadline, the deal collapses. Do you understand? $3.8 billion and it's gone. Victor will lose his mind. The board will lose their minds. We'll be sued into oblivion by the seller. Then I'd suggest you find those documents. We're offering you a consulting fee. $50,000. Right now. Just tell us where the files are. I pretended to think about it. Make it $250,000, and I need it wired to my account before I say a single word. That's insane. Then good luck, Derek. Wait. I could hear him talking to someone in the background, probably Victor, who was probably turning purple. Okay. Fine. $250. Where are the files? Wire the money first. I'll wait. It took them 11 minutes to wire $250,000 to my account. I checked my banking app while holding a plank pose. The longest 11 minutes of Derek's life, I imagine. There's an encrypted thumb drive in the bottom right drawer of what used to be my desk, I said. It's labeled Personal Recipes. The password is the date of Victor's first deal in 1987, followed by the ticker symbol for Apollo's biggest competitor, followed by the badge number of the U examiner assigned to our case. All no spaces, case sensitive. You have 43 minutes until the Brussels filing office closes. The courier service I had on standby was De Luca International, but I canceled them on my last day. So you'll need to find someone else who can get across the city, in Friday traffic, in less than 40 minutes. I'd recommend a motorcycle courier. There's a service called Quick Run that Victor has used before for emergencies. They're expensive but reliable. You're welcome. I hung up and went back to my yoga. They missed the deadline by 6 minutes. The Apollo deal didn't collapse immediately, of course. These things never do. What happened was much slower and more expensive. The seller's legal team filed a formal notice of the missed deadline. Our legal team filed an emergency motion with the EU regulators for an extension. The regulators granted a 30-day extension, but imposed a $4.5 million fine for the administrative failure. The seller, smelling blood in the water, renegotiated the purchase price down by $120 million, arguing that the delay had caused market condition changes. Victor had to agree because walking away would mean losing the $150 million breakup fee plus the firm's reputation. But that was just the Apollo deal. The real chaos was everything else. Kaylee, to her credit, was trying her best. But she didn't know what she didn't know, and Emily the AI was actively making things worse. The AI had been trained on standard executive scheduling, which meant it did things like schedule Victor for a 9 a.m. meeting in Boston and a 10 a.m. meeting in Miami without accounting for travel time. Double booked his investor calls because it didn't understand that call with the Abu Dhabi Investment Authority and ADI quarterly check-in were the same meeting. It sent meeting confirmations to the wrong email addresses because it auto-populated from outdated contact lists. Within 3 weeks, Victor had missed 2 board meetings, showed up to the wrong restaurant for a dinner with a Chinese sovereign wealth fund, costing a potential $200 million investment, and accidentally CC'd a Wall Street Journal reporter on an email chain about a confidential acquisition. That last one made the front page of the WSJ's business section. Caldwell and partners in turmoil, missed deadlines and indie chaos, plague storied PE firm. The article quoted anonymous sources describing Victor as increasingly erratic and disorganized, which was code for no longer has the person who made him look competent for 10 years. The firm's other partners started to panic. 3 of them called me within a week. Same conversation every time. Sofia, what would it take to get you to come back? My answer was always the same. I'm retired. But I'm available for consulting at $2,500 per hour, 10-hour minimum, payment in advance. 2 of them paid it. I spent 10 hours on the phone, untangling at Australian regulatory filing that Kaylee had somehow submitted to the wrong government agency. She'd sent mining rights documents to the Department of Education, and another 10 hours reconstructing the contact database for a Middle Eastern investor roadshow that Emily had corrupted by merging it with Victor's personal holiday card list, resulting in invitation emails being sent to Victor's dentist and his car mechanic. That was $50,000 for 20 hours of work I could do in my pajamas while watching Netflix. But Derek, beautiful stupid Derek, refused to admit defeat, doubled down on the AI system. He hired a second junior admin to support Kaylee, bought a premium version of Evely that cost $500 a month instead of a $49 and supposedly had advanced contextual learning. And then came the Senator Mason disaster. Senator Bradley Mason was a ranking member of the Senate Finance Committee and one of the most powerful people in Washington. When it came to private equity regulation, he hated PE firms with the burning passion of 1,000 suns, and he had been trying to pass legislation that would basically destroy the entire industry for the last 6 years. The only reason he hadn't succeeded was that Victor had spent 15 years carefully cultivating a relationship with Mason's wife, Patricia, who was a major art collector and sat on the board of the Met. Every year, Victor donated $100,000 to Patricia's favorite charity, attended her fundraising galas, and sent her personalized birthday gifts that I spent weeks selecting. In return, Patricia thought Victor was one of the good ones, and had quietly convinced her husband to tone down his most aggressive legislative proposals. This system required precise, delicate maintenance. Emily the AI, in its infinite algorithmic wisdom, sent Patricia Mason an automated happy birthday email on the wrong date. it had pulled the birth date from a different Patricia Mason in Florida, with a gift card to Sephora, as the AI had determined that woman aged 60-70 enjoy beauty products, and signed it. Best wishes, Victor Caldwell and the team at Caldwell and Partners. Patricia Mason was 73 years old, had a personal net worth of $400 million, and did not shop at Sephora. She forwarded the email to her husband with the subject line, "Is this a joke?" Senator Mason introduced his most aggressive anti-PE bill 3 days later. It passed. It would cost the entire private equity industry an estimated $40 billion annually in new taxes and regulatory compliance. Caldwell and Partners' share of that would be roughly $340 million per year. Because of a $50 Sephora gift card, Victor, finally, had enough. The call came on a Tuesday morning exactly 2 months after I'd left. Not from Derek this time. From Victor himself. "Sofia," he said, and his voice sounded older than I'd ever heard it, "I made a mistake." I was silent. Let him cook. Derek is gone. I fired him this morning. The board wanted me to announce it as a mutual departure for new opportunities, but I told them to shove it. I fired him, and I made sure every headhunter in the industry knows exactly why. He'll be lucky to get a job managing a Dairy Queen by the time I'm done with him. That's unfortunate, I said, examining my nails. I'd gotten them done the day before. A deep red. Power color. Kaylee is gone too. And Emily. And the whole stupid AI experiment. I want you back. I'm retired. Victor. Name your price. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. I'd spent 2 months watching the firm I'd built alongside him nearly collapse because a 33-year-old with an MBA and a God complex thought I was replaceable. I'd watched Victor's reputation take hit after hit. I'd watched deals fall apart and relationships crumble and millions of dollars evaporate into thin air, and now I was going to make them pay for every single second of it. $450,000 base salary, I said. Performance bonus structure tied to deal closings, minimum $200,000 annually. Full benefits including the executive healthcare plan, not the standard one. 4 weeks vacation, actually taken, not just accrued and ignored. A formal title chief of staff, not executive secretary. Equity in the firm, 0.5%, fully vested immediately, and a written contract that states my position cannot be eliminated or modified without unanimous partner approval and my consent. Done. I blinked. I'd expected negotiation. Just like that. "Sofia, in the 2 months since you left, you've cost me about $125 million in lost deal value, renegotiated terms, regulatory fines, and legal fees. You've also made me $50,000 in consulting on 2 disasters that would have cost me another $30 million if you hadn't fixed them. The math is pretty fucking clear. Do you want the offer in writing, or are you going to keep busting my balls?" I smiled. "I'll need it in writing. And Victor, I start Monday, but I'm taking Friday off. I have a yoga class." He actually laughed. I came back the following Monday to a hero's welcome that no one acknowledged out loud but everyone felt. The partners nodded at me with visible relief. The junior associates looked at me like I'd returned from the dead. Someone had put flowers on my desk with a card that said, "Thank God," in handwriting I recognized as belonging to Marcus, the general counsel, who'd probably aged 10 years in 2 months. My old desk had been restored exactly as I'd left it. The Swiss espresso machine was back. My filing system was untouched, because no one else had been able to figure out how to access it. Took me 3 days to unfuck everything Derek and Kaylee had broken. I rebuilt the calendar system from scratch, pulling data from 17 different sources, including several I'd kept as personal backups, that the firm didn't even know existed. I personally called 43 different assistants, lawyers, bankers, and government officials to repair relationships and clarify miscommunications. I sent handwritten apology notes to Patricia Mason's, along with a $250,000 donation to her charity, and a first edition Georgia O'Keeffe print I knew she'd been trying to acquire, and managed to get a 30-minute phone call with the senator himself, which I parlayed into a promise to reconsider certain provisions of his legislation. I fired the AI system and hired 2 additional human assistants who reported directly to me, with strict instructions that they were there to execute my systems, not replace them. And then I got back to work doing what I do best, making Victor Caldwell look like the most organized, well, connected, competent CEO in the private equity world, when in reality he was a brilliant but chaotic genius who would forget his own birthday if I didn't remind him. The Apollo deal finally closed 4 months later than planned, at the reduced price, but it closed. The firm survived. Victor's reputation recovered slowly, explained away in trade publications as brief transitional period during operational restructuring. Derek Harrington, meanwhile, found out exactly how small the private equity world really is. I didn't have to do anything to him directly. I simply let it be known, through the whisper network of executive assistants that actually runs the entire financial industry, exactly what had happened. How he'd fired a 25-year veteran to save $2 to $64,000 and ended up costing the firm over $125 million. How his AI experiment had nearly destroyed one of the most respected firms in the business. Executive assistants talk to each other. We have our own networks, our own conferences, our own information channels that the executives we support don't even know exist. And when one of us gets screwed over, we remember. Derek's next 3 job interviews mysteriously fell through at the final stage. I know because one of the assistants who scheduled his interviews was my friend Rachel, who works at Blackstone. Another was my former mentee at KKR. The third was my college roommate's daughter at Apollo. They didn't sabotage him, exactly. They just made sure that certain information came up naturally. Oh, you worked at Caldwell and Partners during that messy period, didn't you? What was that all about? Derek's LinkedIn currently lists him as an independent consultant. His last post was 6 months ago about embracing new challenges and opportunities in the dynamic world of business transformation. Which means he's unemployed. As for Kaylee, I actually don't blame her. She was a 22-year-old kid thrown into a situation she had no business being in, set up to fail by a manager who thought expertise was something you could replace with software. I heard through the network that she ended up taking a job as a real executive assistant at a mid-sized marketing firm, where she's apparently doing quite learning the actual fundamentals of the job. I sent her a LinkedIn message a few months after I came back. You did your best in an impossible situation. That's all anyone can do. Good luck out there. She responded, "Thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't fill your shoes. I didn't realize what the job was until I tried to do it. A smart kid. She'll be fine. Me? I'm still here. Chief of staff, 0.5% equity, $450,000 base plus bonuses that have averaged $3 to $40,000 for the last 2 years. I'm one of the highest paid non-partner executives in the firm, and I'm worth every penny." Victor is talking about retirement again, for real this time. When he does, my equity stake will be worth approximately $8.4 million, based on the firm's current valuation. Not bad for someone Derek thought he could replace with a 49 per month AI and a recent college graduate. The lesson here, if there is one, is simple. Expertise isn't just what you know. It's what you know that no one else knows they need to know. It's the invisible architecture that holds everything together, the institutional knowledge that doesn't live in any manual or database, the relationships that took decades to build and can be destroyed in a single thoughtless email. You can't automate that. You can't outsource it. You can't replace it with someone cheaper and younger and more innovative. You can try, but it will cost you. In Derek's case, cost him his career and the firm $125 million. And it cost me absolutely nothing, except 2 months of the best vacation I've ever had, followed by a 56% raise and an equity stake that will fund my actual retirement in about 5 years. I still have that post-it note I left for Kaylee on her monitor. Good luck. I keep it in my desk drawer as a reminder. Some people need to learn the hard way that not everything valuable can be measured in a spreadsheet. And some of us get paid very, very well to be irreplaceable.